Hey everyone, Dan here. Welcome to another episode of Forward Looking Leadership. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Lauren Goldberg. Lauren is a career self-discovery and leadership coach for changemakers working with their ADHD instead of against it. Lauren, thanks so much for joining me on Forward Looking Leadership.
Thanks for having me. Excited to have this conversation and get into some juicy leadership questions.
Likewise. So first, what non-obvious things do leaders need to know about working with people with ADHD?
So ADHD is often perceived negatively because of its name, the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But that's just bad branding, basically. So ADHDers have hyperactive brains, which can appear outwardly or not. And I think that the biggest thing that leaders can do is, well, a few things. So first is, like, there are some folks who are not open to sharing having ADHD. So it's important not to focus on the, like, getting a diagnosis or identifying. Some people don't even have a diagnosis. It's just a suspect or assume that they have it because it's really hard to get a diagnosis. That's a conversation for another time. But basically, it's important to just focus on what folks have, what their needs are, and how to get those needs met. And I think being open to exploring different ways of working, trying different things so that your team members feel comfortable figuring out a way that works for them and not putting so much energy into trying to fit themselves into a box that does not set them up for success. So allowing them to be open and exploring, like, other ways of working together. And yeah, I think just being flexible is the first thing. And the second thing I'll say is, for somebody who is, I mean, this isn't just ADHDers, this is like any team member, right? Like, when you genuinely believe that this person is amazing, has amazing skills, like, you have confidence in them. You can see their potential. You just, like, have that deep belief in them. That comes out in your energy when you talk to them. And that is something that your team members absorb from you, right? And as a leader, you want to empower people, but it's just, some of that comes from the energy that is absorbed from you. And there are a lot of people who, like, don't believe in themselves until they have somebody who believes in them and shows them, like, what that confidence in them can look like. So I think that's, like, incredibly impactful as a leader. And so that's not just ADHDers, that's like any team member, any colleague. And that's something, if you don't feel that way about somebody, I think that's actually some internal work that can be done before working with and communicating with those people. So,
And you talked about the bad branding with ADHD. What does it really look like to work with your ADHD rather than against it?
So first of all, there's a lot of internalized ableism. So ableism is this idea or this belief that being non-disabled is a superior way of being. And that comes up in so much of our culture, so much of our language, so much of the way the world has been designed, the way our workplaces are designed, how we run meetings, or just lots of, like, ways that ableism comes up. And internalized ableism is like, I don't believe I'm good enough because of my ADHD. Or for me, I also am partially deaf. So for a long time, I told myself, like, my inner bully, my, like, inner voice, inner critic was saying, you're broken because your ears don't work the way they're supposed to. And that was all internalized ableism. So being able to excavate that and shift that voice, or rather turn down the volume on that voice and shift to more self-compassion, is what it looks like to not work against your natural tendencies, your natural conditions, but working with it, understanding it, knowing what your needs are, knowing how to advocate for yourself, and knowing what your strengths are. So all of that is really like the magic of not putting all this effort trying to fit into a box, but rather recognizing what unique shape you are and carving out changes that need to be made to fit you.
And when you're working with clients on this and you're drawing from your own experience, having gone through a version of this yourself too, what do you tend to work with people on to really shift this?
So everything that I do has self-compassion muscle strengthening baked into it.
Mm.
I have this framework that I developed that I call the kind, bold, badass framework. And there are three parts of it. And the first part is excavate. So we're exploring like what things have we learned that we have internalized that are not serving us, or you specifically, the client, and how can we chip away at that to reveal what actually matters to you, how you actually want to make decisions, like what you base those decisions on because you value them and not because other people have like put those standards on you. That's the first piece. The second piece is invigorate. I'm all about like follow your energy. What would be energizing? Let's come up with an action plan that has energizing next steps to you. As your coach, I'm not going to tell you like you should do this. I'm not even going to really give you advice. That's like not what my coaching looks like. My coaching is like helping you discover what what is energizing for you so that you can take steps towards that to achieve your goal. And it's going to be a whole lot easier to take those steps if you're excited about them than if somebody just tells you to do them, right? It's a lot more powerful to do the work that way. So that's the second part. And then that third part is advocate. So I'm working with clients to build their toolkit so that they can advocate for themselves. This goes for anybody, not just folks with disabilities or chronic conditions or neurodivergent. Again, being able to like recognize what your needs are and then being able to communicate about your needs. So that's the advocacy piece, and being able to make requests that allow you to meet your needs while also meeting the needs of others, the people around you, the team that you're working with, because you're all on the same team, right? You're all working together and you all have needs, and all of those needs, not all of those needs, but many of those needs are unique. How can you do that from a place of like kindness and compassion and self-compassion?
Self-compassion has some tie-ins to confidence, as you've written about, and there's this idea that you have of overconfidence and underconfidence coming from the same place oftentimes, which I
Mm-hmm.
really thought was illuminating in some ways of what can present as overconfidence might actually be underconfidence manifesting.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
can you talk about that a little bit more and how you work with clients on this healthier kind of confidence, this kind of confidence that comes from a better place?
So I'll start off by saying the way that I learned to adapt to a world that made me feel very uncomfortable and anxious and not good enough was by being that cocky snob
Mm.
that was judging everything and everyone in every moment so harshly. And it was such an energy suck. Turns out that's not a great way to make friends either. So, I look back and I have a lot of compassion for younger Lauren, who was just trying to do what she thought she needed to do to survive and to earn love and to protect herself. And now looking back, I realized that when I was most overconfident or cocky or, arrogant is when I was most insecure. And when I was most insecure is when I was most judgmental. If you have someone saying, I don't feel confident in myself, I'm lacking confidence, I just like don't feel good enough. And I need to prove to everybody that I'm confident enough, that I am worthy of love, that I, like am the greatest thing to walk the earth. It's comes from that self-judgment. That judgment comes from fear, right? The fear of not being good enough, the fear of not being accepted, the fear of not being loved. And so these are sort of like baseline things that fuel our inner voice, our inner saboteur. So that's why I say that oftentimes underconfidence, lack of confidence, and overconfidence, being cocky, come from the same place. So the work that I'm doing with clients to help them establish more self compassion, more genuine self love, and more deeply rooted, genuine confidence that doesn't come from a place of self hate is like making sure that they are one able to recognize what those inner voices are saying, what those parts of them are saying that are making them feel small, and where they feel like they need to, where they're either undercompensating or overcompensating, and being able to let go of what's not serving them. And like I said, we work on building those self-compassion muscles. So a lot of that is being able to reframe things. Some of it is unconscious pattern disruption, right? The way that we talk to ourselves is a habit, right? And so how we break that habit is creating new associations, new neural pathways in our brains, rewiring our brains, as they say, and like establishing new habits, right? Because that voice, like the way that we talk to ourselves, is a habit. So yeah, being able to shift that voice or fill people's toolkits so that they can feel what they're feeling in their bodies and then react to it with kindness. Yeah, sometimes that is those tools can look like a somatic experience. It could be a visualization that they bring themselves back to. It can be a breathing exercise. It can be whatever we work on that ends up in their stress busting toolkit. So yeah, that's a little bit about the work that I do to help folks with their confidence.
Yeah, it's reminding me so much. We had a previous guest, Dr. Jamie Goff, and she wrote a book called The Secure Leader, and she basically brought in attachment theory and this self-worth and all of this kind of stuff into the leadership space. So I'll definitely send you a link to that after. But it's a really important part of this that I think gets overlooked in a lot of coaching. This is a really common thing that clients come to us with. And I don't know, some very high percentage of my client, 15-20% of my clients, I would say, come to me with ADHD or some sort of neurodivergence. And it's it's a very common thing, and I think kind of overlooked and glossed over a lot of the time.
And I feel especially with the folks who are ADHD or neurodivergent, and they can recognize, they feel like their brain works differently. They feel like they've learned, especially in like mainstream school, where you have to adapt or else,
Hmm.
right? There's like a right way and a wrong way. There's grades. There's getting your teacher's approval. There's like it doesn't leave a ton of room for you to just explore who you are beyond like what your achievements are, what your grades are, I mean, maybe I'm just projecting because that's how I felt in school, but a lot of my clients, I think, like feel that same way, that they just tried so hard and they put so much effort into just trying to mask
Mm.
and appear that they were like normal and not struggling or not like different. And it turns out that as you get older, I feel like that doesn't really apply once you're out of school. Being able to embrace, like I said before, like what that unique shape is that you make up is more empowering than trying to fit yourself into this like this box that wasn't designed for you and your
Yeah.
unique needs.
Thanks for sharing that. No, that seems spot on from everything I've heard from folks too. And it just feels like a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of personal kind of attention going toward this masking, as you said. And how much better is life in the world when you can spend that toward the things that you actually want to be spending it on? What does rejection sensitivity dysphoria mean, and how can
Mm.
people work to have a better relationship with rejection?
Yeah, so this is a really common experience for folks who with ADHD, and it's not a diagnosable thing. It's not a diagnosis, but rather a common experience of emotional pain in response to perceived rejection or criticism or failure. So that feeling goes beyond disliking an unpleasant experience of rejection, but like it can feel intolerable or excruciating. And that's according to Very Well Mind. So I do have some tips for helping people regulate that. And that first tip is just being aware that this happens to you. It's a tendency, and once you recognize that that's coming up for you, you can like choose to make the shift, right? Choose to talk to yourself with more compassion. You can seek out people and experiences that change your perspective, change your mood, change your, reframe your situation. So the awareness piece is the first piece. I talked about, that inner critic voice and being able to like building your skills so that you can switch over to that inner best friend, that inner self compassionate voice, whatever that looks like for you. So I have a lot of clients who answer the question like, in this situation, what would a friend say to you that was experiencing this? And how would you respond? Or what would a loving friend say to you right now in this situation while you're feeling these feelings? And it can help to actually write it out and see it and feel it and internalize it that way. So yeah, that's another tool that we develop in coaching and can be really helpful for folks who are experiencing rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I think it's also important to connect with your support squad, whoever you feel safe calling to talk through those feelings of not feeling good enough or feeling rejected. I feel like when I have a hard time remembering what my light looks like when I shine it out on the world, like I have friends and mentors that are there to remind me. They're good at reminding me like what that looks like. And that can also help me make the shift. I think the other one is this is going to sound really fluffy, but
Go for it.
I tell people like so often we are assuming that people, if you're experiencing rejection sensitivity, it's like there's an assumption there that people hate you or people don't like you or people don't think you're good enough, and there's just like there are assumptions being made there without facts oftentimes. And so to shift that, to turn that around and actually assume the opposite, assume love, assume that people do care about you and like you, like what will that mean for you? And that can actually just shift your energy. For me, like I was afraid to post on social media for so long. And now I assume that the people who are following me on social media want to hear from me. Like that's why they're following me. It's just a more compassionate, self compassionate place to operate from, is to assume love. And again, that's like a habit that we can practice. That's a muscle that we can strengthen. And then the last tip I'll give is just if you have an intrusive thought, like a rumination that is hard to break, then you have to interrupt it because the spiral, it's so easy to spiral. So how do we stop the spiral? And often we just have to interrupt it. So an interruption could look like changing an activity or imagining the silliest thing happening in a situation, like getting up and doing jumping jacks, like whatever it is that feels like an interruption so that you can just switch modes mentally and physically. That can help break the cycle of rumination and allow you to take a breath, have that awareness. Okay, this is happening. What do I need? What tools are in my toolkit to handle this situation? How can I be more self compassionate?
Yeah, those are
Yeah.
hugely valuable tips. On the inner bully and the inner best friends, I think that's an amazing shift to make. And I think a lot of people listening will probably get how that can all of a sudden quiet a lot of these intrusive thoughts that they might have about themselves and all of this kind of a thing. Anything more to say on how to make that shift for people?
It's funny that you asked me about that because I am in the habit of saying like inner bully, inner best friend because I've said that for so long, but I'm actually shifting my perspective on that as I learn more about parts work, even just labeling the voices, like pre-labeling them inner bully. It is judgmental. It comes from like it sort of puts judgment on it,
Hmm.
when in reality, my inner bully voice, just to like use myself as an example, like my bully voice is often just my sad 8-year-old self. And so for me to like assume that this voice is bullying me and not allow it space to just sort of like be and feel and sort of process it and realize, oh, okay, actually, it's just my 8-year-old self being sad, that and offering, like going through the exercise of offering love to that sad 8-year-old self. Like that feels a lot better than being like, well, you're being a bully and that's not okay and being shameful about it. Right. So I'm actually shifting. I'm in the process of kind of shifting some of that language and figuring out how to adapt my coaching so that it's not so like hard, like those hard labels that put judgment on it before we even do anything in the exercise. But I do think, a lot of people, it resonates with a lot of people that they have an inner critic, an inner saboteur, an inner voice that sounds mean. So it's been easy to call it the inner bully for a long time, but as I'm trying to create more space for non-judgment, that's like one way that I'm doing that in my coaching. And the inner best friend is like, even calling it an inner best friend sort of like separates you from it. And I want people to really like know that that's them. I don't want it to feel like it's this like far away thing
Hmm.
outside of themselves, that it actually is how they talk, how they love themselves, and how they extend compassion to other people. And like that is like true to who they are. So yeah, I'm actually kind of like shifting some of that language, but those, I think in that rambly explanation, you could probably see like how we use those terms to recognize what's not serving us and make the shift towards more self-compassion.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, and it hits home for me too in terms of how we're updating how we think about our own practice as we learn more and more. So I know that can be a bit vulnerable to share when it's something that you've been working on with people, and just
Oh,
yeah, really appreciate you doing that. I've had on previous guests, so I just had on a guy named Roger Kastner who was talking about incorporating parts work into coaching. Would love for you to share a bit more about how you're thinking about doing that, and also any other of these kind of new kind of frontier things that you're incorporating into your coaching.
yeah. So I'm not too deep into exploring that yet. That's not one of the things that I am exploring right now. But the thing that I have been exploring in more detail is Nonviolent Communication by Marshall B. Rosenberg. And I actually have read and trained in parts of nonviolent communication back in college, actually, but I had never read the book. So now I actually just read the book cover to cover for the first time.
Okay.
That's Nonviolent Communication by Marshall B. Rosenberg. I read the book and I was like, wow, this is a leadership game changer. Like
Wow.
I've
Okay.
already been using it in my coaching, but like to dive in even deeper into it, I'm like, wow, this is like shifting like into a whole like different way of thinking and like seeing yourself and interactions with the world. And yeah, I just, so I do recommend it. I believe it really is a leadership game changer. And I started to question myself because I was like, yeah, I really don't have any criticisms with this technique or this framework. And so, I did a little research, and I'm about to get a workbook called Decolonizing Nonviolent Communication. And that's by Meenachi. That's Meenadchi. And so I'm really excited about that because, again, I want to see like what is missing here from the nonviolent communication framework, and how else can we be making it more inclusive and not just, yeah, how can we make it a more equitable framework to use. So I'm really excited about that. I've also gotten like my special interest lately has been learning more about cancel culture. And I think people are really, really sick of cancel culture. Like it doesn't feel good for anybody. Maybe like for the person who's canceling or the people who are canceling, there's like an initial kind of like, you're not enough for us. Like either you're for us or against us. And there's sort of like an initial sort of dopamine hit from that. But I think like long term, it doesn't feel good. So yeah, I've been really like obsessed with that. So now I'm reading the book Calling In How to Make I'm sorry, no, it's Calling In How to Start Making Change with Those You'd Rather Cancel by Loretta Ross. And like from the first chapter, I'm so hooked. So I'm excited to keep reading that. And so many of the clients that I work with are in social and environmental impact. So many of them are like care about creating a more equitable world, a more inclusive world. And it's hard to build that when we have this very wide gap between like what's acceptable for creating change and what's unacceptable for creating change, and not really like bridging the gap between, yeah, just having that like black and white thinking. You're either for us or against us, or you're great or you're terrible. It's just like people are different, and how do we work through those differences? And so yeah, that feels way better to me for the purposes of like creating social change. That's what I'm obsessed with lately.
It's a real humility to that, and I think it's so important to talk with people who we might not agree with, and even if you don't convince them to your way of thinking, it's always an interesting conversation. I think if people are acting in good faith, at least. I think there's times where it's okay, this is
Yeah.
not someone who is, but
These conversations, a lot of the conversations are just not happening because people are putting labels on other people and making assumptions about other people, and refusing to even engage in conversation. No change can happen. No needs can get met by either side or multiple sides because there isn't an open-mindedness and a recognition that we're all humans, we all have needs, and how can we work together to get those needs met. And that's connected to the nonviolent communication. So it's all kind of it's all overlapping for me right now.
yeah, there's a perfect ideology and lacking in actual efficacy, I think is a symptom of our times. So
Yeah.
just for people who aren't familiar with it, what is the crux of nonviolent communication? What is this whole framework movement kind of about?
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole framework is that we have needs. Everybody has like basic needs that need to be met. And being able to approach conversations with empathy and understanding and wanting to meet each other's needs, which Marshall B. Rosenberg, like, what he argues is that you can you can do that with nonviolent communication. Being able to make observations about what's happening without judgment and without bias, without analysis and evaluation, being able to share more about what you're feeling and connecting it to whatever your unmet needs are, and then making a request that allows you to meet your need without, while also meeting the needs of whoever else you're, communicating with. And then on the flip side, being able to receive criticism and blame and confrontation with empathy, with understanding people's feelings, or like doing what you can to understand people's feelings, doing what you can to understand what their unmet needs are, and offering help or a solution that says like, hey, we're on the same team. We're not looking at each other like you are the problem, but rather we're looking at the problem together side by side, and we want to solve it together. Yeah, and we're on the same team. And again, we have needs that we can both have met through this conversation and reflection and yeah, working together.
Yeah. And what's the decolonizing criticism of this, I guess?
I actually don't. I'm not even sure that it is a criticism, but it is a. I'm excited to explore that more. So one criticism that I've seen online is that nonviolent communication, it's for folks who are privileged. Mm. And so I'm curious to explore deeper into that and say, well, how can we make it so that that's not the case? And what does decolonizing nonviolent communication look like? I'm so curious. I'm about to get the workbook started. So I don't know, but I'll report back when I learn more.
Well, looking forward to it. I'm going to dig into both of these as well. This is really interesting. In terms of books that you find yourself recommending the most often to others, what comes to mind for that?
I'm often recommending books that expose people to disability justice, because a lot of the work that I'm doing is through the lens of disability justice and like how we change the way that we work, how we advocate for ourselves, and how we can think about careers in a different way that's not ableist. Some of the books I would recommend on that end are My Body is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor, Being Human by Judy Human. There's a book that I'm excited to read called Care Work. And I actually don't have the author's name in front of me right now, but that covers like interdependence. That's another thing that I'm excited to read and have had that recommended to me and is on my list to tackle next.
Cool. Well, we will link to all of those in the show notes and encourage everyone listening to read those. I will definitely be reading those myself too. So this has been such a great conversation. Thanks for taking the time to come on and share all of your expertise and your personal experience with everyone listening. If people want to follow along with you, with your work, and get in touch if they'd like, how can they do that?
My website is laurengoldbergcoaching.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. You'll find me at Lauren Goldberg. I'm on Instagram. You can find me there as well. And yeah, feel free to just send me an email too. You'll find my contact form on my website. I'd love to just get to know people and have conversations and collaborations. And I'm happy to connect with your community, Dan.
Great. Thanks so much, Lauren. And would encourage everyone listening who's interested to do that. It's a really generous offer. So, Lauren, thank you so much again for joining us. This was such a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here with you, and just excited to share some of these resources, some of these ideas, and like the messy middle of figuring out like how to adapt our coaching to an ever-changing world.
Very fascinating, and on the cutting edge of some of this stuff, and looking forward to keeping our relationship going as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren.